Hey everybody, Matt Koval here. I want to preface this whole video by saying this is not the announcement of a tool. This video is meant to be the design document for a tool. I am not a database programmer. I'm not a web developer. I am not someone who can implement this idea. Instead, I'm someone who, using my experience as a game developer, can lay out a design document saying, how should this thing work? I can host it. I already have a website set up, and I have a friend of mine, my buddy Jerry, who is an IT professional. He works at Turtle Rock Studios, and he is somebody who can help manage and maybe even help implement this thing, but I'm not a database programmer. Instead, we have to rely on you in the D&D community, you in the YouTube community to say, is what we want possible? And if it's possible, what is the best way to implement it? Of course, it's possible that what I want to do isn't feasible, that the tool that I'm thinking of in the way I'm thinking of it wouldn't work, and that in order to implement such a thing, we may have to compromise on so many principles that it ultimately ends up not being worth it. And so you may be watching this video in the weeks or months to come and say, hey, where's the tool? And maybe it isn't there, maybe it doesn't exist, but I figure it's worth a shot. So we recently hit 10,000 subscribers, and in fact, as I'm recording this, we just hit 12,000 subscribers last night, which is crazy. It's been less than 3 months. I genuinely had no idea that the channel would become as popular as it has, as quickly as it has. As we started to get close to 10,000 subscribers, I started to think, this is a lot of people who are watching me regularly. In fact, we have more than 10,000 people viewing all the videos, and I started to wonder what could be done with this. And I remembered what it says in the back of the Bible. It says, with great power comes great money. Money? No, it doesn't sound right. Women. Why? With great power comes the women. No, that doesn't. Hang on a minute. All right, typing, looking up, going to Google. With great power, typing comes great responsibility. Oh, that doesn't sound interesting. Oh, well, responsibility is, with great power apparently comes great responsibility. And so with this viewership, I thought, let's try to make something happen. So I am a dungeon master, but I'm also a writer, and it may seem strange to hear a writer say this, but I find my time as a DM in preparation is best spent finding content that is already 80% of what I want, and then using my time, my limited time, to reskin that 20% and fix, like, where is this adventure set, or who's the bad guy, what does the bad guy want, maybe change some encounters and tailor them more for my players. You know, back in the 70s or the 80s, that would have been considered a somewhat heretical statement, the idea that there was a virtue in using pre-published content, and that maybe you shouldn't roll your own, maybe you shouldn't do everything from scratch. But back then, we used our time much differently. There wasn't the internet back then. There wasn't YouTube back then. We didn't live as much of our lives online. We didn't have as many games to play, right? We didn't have as many ways to interact with our friends. And so our time is sliced much thinner now, I find. So if you have a time machine and can go back to the 1970s and you're stuck there with no internet, I do recommend you get out some graph paper, you get out some notebooks, and you start rolling your own adventures and building your own campaign setting. But now in the modern era, I really feel as though the best way for you to invest your time as a DM is finding the adventure that already gets you, like I said, about 80% of the way there, and then spending your time fixing that 20% rather than trying to come up with a time to do all 100%. And there have been hundreds, if not, I think thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of official published adventures in the last 40 years of the game. I don't think most people are aware of how many adventures are out there that were written by professional writers and edited and illustrated by companies like Wizards of the Coast and TSR. And even, you know, in the early 2000s, Wizards of the Coast opened up the game legally and made it so that anybody who wanted to could write and publish their own adventures. And so you got all of the different publishing houses, guys like Green Ronin, guys like AEG, publishing adventures for D&D. So there are tens of thousands of adventures out there. There must be one that is close to the one you want, and it would be easier for you to just look that adventure up and then find it and hopefully be able to buy it online and then reskin it. Spend your time reading it, learning it, and tweaking it to make it fit your campaign and your world and your players rather than try to do it all from scratch. Like, I'm not a cartographer. The maps that I come up with are terrible. It's much easier for me. Sometimes I just go and grab the maps, you know, and I take the maps and I reskin them. Like, for instance, TSR and Wizards of the Coast both published a monthly magazine called Dungeon Magazine, and each issue of Dungeon Magazine came with 3 to 5 little tiny adventures. Did you know that there are adventures that are explicitly made for solo play, one DM and one player, and there's like a couple of thief adventures and a couple of fighter adventures and a couple of wizard adventures? I think that's fantastic. I think some of those adventures are pretty cool. I used one of them in my Birthright game for my friend Mark when he wanted to go off on a solo adventure. I think I found a druid solo adventure. So these things are out there, and furthermore, it's my conviction that as DMs, we start by wanting a certain scenario, like for instance, a low-level dungeon or a wizard's tower or something set in a city, an urban adventure. I mean, I have done this literally dozens, it might be over 100 of times since the birth of the internet, where I knew what happened next in my campaign. I knew that the players were going to go investigate a wizard's tower, but I didn't have an adventure ready, and I thought there has to be an adventure out there, someone has already done that features a wizard's tower, and I couldn't find exactly the one I wanted. Because there is no database of adventures that lists every adventure that's been published. Doesn't have to be every adventure. Can't it just be enough? It could just be enough that lists many adventures and grows over time as we add stuff to it, and lists what environments these adventures were in and when they were published and what system they were for, because these are all useful pieces of information. If there's a 5th edition adventure that does what I want, it will be easier to adapt than an adventure that came out in 1979. Maybe the players want to go to a city, and I think, it'd be great if there were an adventure in the city. Can I find a city adventure for my party? My party is 9th level. Maybe it turns out that there are a lot of people online who've asked the same question, but they were asking about low-level adventures, so I can never find exactly what I'm looking for. So that's the need, the desire on our part to find the adventure that we're looking for and search a database that includes not the actual adventure. This is not a place where you'd be able to go and download Temple of Elemental Evil. It is literally like IMDb, but for adventures. Now, I don't know how to do something like that, but I have reserved a website, adventurelookup.com, which is where I hope the tool will eventually live, and I'm willing to host it. And my friend Jerry, who's an IT guy, is willing to help us implement it to a certain extent. That guy has a day job, so do I. So there are 2 problems with this. 1, we need to make the tool, and then 2, once we have the tool, we need to be able to populate it with content, right? And so we're going to crowdsource both the creation of the tool and the population of it with content. What I'm imagining would be a lot of work for one person to enter a big adventure. It might only take like half an hour or an hour to enter a small 28-page adventure, but if you're trying to include all the information I'm thinking of for something like Night Below, which is a classic box set for which there is no PDF you can download currently officially, it would be a lot of work, and therefore I don't think it should be something that one person is doing. It should be something that we're all working on together, and everyone works on it when they can, and you look and see, somebody made it about halfway through Night Below, entering in, for instance, all the monsters. I'll go and add some more. So over time, this tool would get more and more useful as more and more adventures are added to it. And we should probably have something like a forum where people can say, hey, I found this list of adventures that this company published in 2001. Does anybody have hard copies of it? And that way we can start ferreting out what are all the adventures. There's certainly no list online of every adventure ever published, because, I'm not even talking about self-published stuff that fans do. I'm talking about actual first-party and third-party companies that made adventures that were professionally written and illustrated. So adventurelookup.com should ultimately host a database that can grow over time, that users can add things to, and I have no idea what the right way to do that is, because I have a feeling that just hosting a database online that anyone can come to and add whatever content they want to would be incredibly bad from a security point of view, right? Like, I'm not an IT professional, but there's something that tells me that databases and the web are a dangerous mix somehow. So this may be something where not anyone can come to it. Maybe only a registered user can do it. And that way we have your email address and we have a record of who added what when. Or maybe this is something where there needs to be a small group of moderators or curators, and everyone else who's adding information first submits it to them, and then they review it and then they approve it. So there's always like a 2-step authentication. And ideally, again, this may not be possible, but ideally it should be possible for users to add new fields to these records, so that somebody might say, you know what, I would like to know what style this adventure is. Is it a dungeon crawl or a highly plot-based, or is it a hex crawl? Is it open world? Is it a sandbox? And they add a field, and the other users go, oh, look, there's a new field. I know the answer to that for this adventure and that adventure, and they go and they populate it. And maybe people won't always agree. Maybe people will argue. We'll have to have some methodology to resolve disputes, kind of like the Wikipedia. And you may be watching this thinking, oh, why don't you use a wiki? No, trust me, a wiki will not do. A wiki is incredibly poor for searching, and this has to be incredibly robust. You have to be able to say, I am searching for an adventure that meets the following criteria, and have multiple criteria, and use ranges. You should be able to say, I'm looking for something published by Gary Gygax, right? Because you like Gary Gygax, and I want to feature elementals. So of course, in a situation like that, the Temple of Elemental Evil will show up. Or maybe I'm looking for an adventure that features undead, that is dungeon crawl for low-level characters in 2nd edition. That is an incredibly reasonable request, and that's 4 different criteria to search for. So something like a Wikipedia is not going to do it. If there was an easy way to do this online, I probably would have thought about it already, but maybe not. Maybe there is a tool for something like this that I haven't seen, but it needs to be something that players can add to, players can search and use multiple search queries, and it needs to be something that is extensible, right? Like a user, did I say players a second ago? That's telling, a little Freudian slip there. Users should be able to add not only data to a given field and say, oh, I happen to know when this adventure was published, like the adventure was already entered, but I'm the one who knows like how many pages it is because I actually have a hard copy of it. But somebody should be able to add a new entire adventure. They should be able to say, oh, no, you guys have forgotten about the Fortress of Badabaskor by the Judges Guild, so I will add that. So users should be able to add entirely new records. They should be able to contribute to the different fields. They should be able to add or maybe just request the addition of a new field. And maybe there needs to be moderators, or maybe not. Maybe if it's all registered users, then we can kind of trust each other. I don't know. Did I just say trust each other when talking about a web app? That was ridiculous, but you get my meaning. So I'm not completely without resources when it comes to this. I have a program that I've been using for a long time called FileMaker Pro. I believe it's owned by Apple. It is, in my experience, a powerful piece of database software. I use it for a lot of game development stuff. And what I've done is I have mocked up a version of adventurelookup.com in FileMaker Pro. Let's take a look. So this is FileMaker Pro. It's a database program that I've been using for a long time, and I've already set up a mock database here inside FileMaker Pro just as an illustration of how I wished the tool that we're proposing could work or should work. And you can see this is, because it's a database program, each adventure gets its own record. This is the record for Night Below, and there's a bunch of fields that I have created. And, you know, I don't know what the min and max level is. I could go look it up. I know what edition it was for. It was for 2nd edition. We see when was it published? What type of, is it a box? Is it a hardcover book? Is it available only in PDF? Is it a classic adventure that was a stapled soft cover? I know who it was published by. It was published by TSR, and I've included, you know, some publishers that I'm aware of. We could add more. And that's part of the goal. I mean, I think this list should be extensible. It should be possible for people to add publishers. Should everybody be able to add a publisher? I don't know. Maybe not. I think that maybe we need some small group of people curating the content, and then a larger group of people, anybody ideally, able to submit content. And you can see how I imagined this should be able to be used. You should be able to search for your favorite authors. You should be able to look for adventures of a certain size. You should be able to say, hey, give me a list of all the Birthright adventures. Give me a list of all the adventures in Lankmar. There were some official Lankmar adventures. I've never seen them. Maybe they were really cool. Maybe if you want to run a urban city-based adventure, the TSR Lankmar adventures, maybe those are the best. I don't know. I've never seen them. I've never played them. That's part of this process, is collecting all of our options so we can pick the best ones or discover the best ones. And it would be nice maybe if there was a way to have like a field. In fact, I could do it right now. I can go into the layout. I can go into the field picker, and I can add a rating. I can say, let's make a new field, and it's called rating. And right now it's going to be text. I mean, I guess I don't know how to make a star-based rating here. And then I can just grab this and drag it in here. And now I've added a new rating. And I can say, let's put this piece over here, and let's put this piece over here, and shrink it down, make it reasonably legible, right? And now if I go back to browse, and here I am in Night Below. I thought Night Below was 5 stars. There. This is something you should be able to do with the tool. I found a need. Oh, it would be nice if you could rate the adventures, and then I gave it a rating. Now, this is the kind of thing I'm sure there are database programmers out there or web developers who are like, wow, just this idea is a big deal, because look at all the different websites that have the ability to give ratings. They have to be able to average the ratings. You want to be able to look at just, you know, all the 5-star ratings. But, you know, I'm ignorant about this stuff. For me, this is good enough. You know, maybe having a rating field that everybody can add. Maybe there need to be registered users, and only a registered user can rate something, because otherwise you'd get weird, you know, degenerate cases with the rating algorithm. I don't know. Does the adventure come with tactical maps? I know a lot of people for whom that's an important consideration. Does the adventure have handouts? I don't know if that's important to everybody. I think it might be important to some people, though. I think there are people who feel like an adventure that has handouts is more fun. And in fact, I know the answer for this one. I know that Night Below absolutely has handouts, and they are awesome. Here is where I really feel like the juice is. The thing that's going to get people to come here and use it is the fact that they can just look up what kind of villains there are in the adventure, because I think that we, as DMs, we have a certain kind of scenario, like what's the environment? Underdark. But also there's a kind of sandbox above ground. How do I describe that? Sandbox local area. Now look what I just did. I just invented a term. I didn't grab this from a pull down list, but this is descriptive, right? Sandbox local area, I think, conveys something of some of the content in Night Below. And you could now then search for, I want to see sandbox stuff, or you can search for Underdark and Night Below will pop up. As it should, by the way. Night Below is a famous Underdark adventure. You know, min level, max level, these I think are critical elements. I think it takes you from first level to 10th level, because we are often looking for adventures that fit our party. And the more appropriate the adventure is to the level of our party, the way it was published, the less work it is on our part. If you have to take a 10th level adventure and ratchet it down for your first level players, it might just not work. It might just not be possible. So we want to be able to use these fields to look for adventures that are in the right level range. Number of characters, I don't know. These are what happens when I put in number of characters 4 and someone else puts in, no, I think there were 5. That's a good question. I don't know what the answer to that is. Maybe that's why we need moderators or curators. Setting, I know there's none specified. Number of pages, I can go look that up, but it is a box set, so this number is going to be somewhat weird. Author, I believe it was Carl Sargent. Carl Sargent. I don't know if I spelled that right. Summary, I mean, you could write one, or you could just pull the summary from the Wikipedia or the back of the adventure. There should be maybe some commentary in here. I don't know. But this, you can see already with just these fields that I've imagined, would be a pretty powerful tool. And to give you an example, let's take a look at some of the other stuff I've put in here. I already added Against the Cult of the Reptile God. It's not finished. I don't have all the villains, for instance. I know you fight troglodytes. I know you fight Explicitica Defilis, who's a spirit naga. Now, notice what I did here is I actually wrote the name of the bad guy and then what type of bad guy, because this software is powerful enough that I just, if I do a look for a naga, it's going to say, of the 4 records that you have in here, one of them has Nagas in it, and it's Against the Cult of the Reptile God. But I could also have looked for Explicitica Defilis. If I was like, what was the module that this famous bad guy appeared in? You can search for the bad guy and find it. Let's go back to looking at all records. And now you're going to notice that, let's imagine we want to search for a really obscure monster, like a Gru. Well, it turns out that the Gru appear in the Temple of Elemental Evil. I have already added the Temple of Elemental Evil, and you can see that I've actually done a lot of work here just to kind of kickstart things. I filled this all out. You can see it's a Advanced Dungeons and Dragons adventure. The setting was Greyhawk. The environment, there's a town, there's a dungeon, there's a ruined keep. If you want to look for adventures written by Gary Gygax or Frank Mentzer, you can do that. But here you can see that I have literally added every single bad guy that I know of from the adventure Temple of Elemental Evil, one of the largest and most famous adventures ever written. Right? So you can literally look for, I'm looking for an adventure that has Zorn in it. I'm looking for an adventure that features bugbears. I'm looking for an adventure that has sphinxes in it. And I think we do that as DMs. We see, you know, Matt Mercer running Critical Role, and we're like, wow, Kavarn is a great beholder bad guy. What adventures have beholders in them? Notice I've made some commentary here. I've said gnolls, there are a lot of gnolls in this adventure. You find a lot of them. And maybe that's important to a DM reading this, is like, oh, it's not just 1 or 2 gnolls. There's a ton of gnolls in here. This adventure features gnolls. I think there's a difference between an adventure that features goblins, there are lots of goblins in this adventure, or an adventure that just has 1 or 2 goblins in it. And there should maybe be a way to distinguish that. One of the things I haven't done is I haven't given them really tags. I haven't said, by the way, this adventure features undead. You would have to actually look for ghouls or ghasts to get Temple of Elemental Evil to show up. But like the Galabdur, this is an obscure bad guy. And if you're looking around in the monster manual and you're like, wow, this monster is really cool, I want to use a Galabdur, is there an adventure that features them? Well, as it turns out, yes, there is. Here you can see I've added one of the bad guys, one of the named bad guys. He's a human magic user. He's level 8, he's level 9 with his familiar. And I think that's useful. I think it would be useful to know who are the big bad guys in the adventure. Maybe this guy should be broken out. Maybe there should be its own field who is the boss monsters. I say that because I think that's another thing DMs like to know and they want to search for. They want to be able to find not just an adventure that has a beholder in it, but are there any adventures where the beholder is the bad guy, the character behind the scenes making everything happen? So this is not, as you can tell, scientific. I've gone through here and used a lot of human language to describe some of these things, but FileMaker Pro is a powerful piece of software and I can search for, bandits. I could probably add a tag like humans. Do we even need to say that there are bandits in an adventure unless the adventure is about bandits? I don't think so. I think we could probably cut this. Right. And that's where a lot of the curation comes from is, yeah, technically there are human men at arms. In fact, I think there is an example of that in here. Technically you can fight human men at arms in here, but is that worth an entry? I'm not sure. Can we not just take it as read that lots of adventures have stats for the local farmers or the people in the inn? I think we can. And that brings me to the subject of items. Here are all the items in the Temple of Elemental Evil. There's a ton of them. And some of these are famous named items. Like I think one of the Swords of Answering, Frag Rack, is in here. So if you're like that, here it is. If you are looking at the DM's guide and you see this great classic sword and you're like, wow, what adventure is that weapon in? It is a unique named item. You can come to this tool, you can search for it, and it will tell you. Pretty sure this figurine is a marble elephant, not a normal elephant. Is it important that it's an Asiatic elephant? I don't think so, but it doesn't cost anything to put this tag in here. Right, here's another example. The Ebony Fly is a classic item, magic item from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I think it would be neat for a DM or even players. Like, players often find out about these things and they're like, wow, where can I find one of these? I want one. And obviously you can make your own adventure, or you can just grab an Ebony Fly and stick it in your adventure, but wouldn't it be neat to find adventures that actually feature these items, especially the famous ones? Does this field need to list arrows +1, arrows +2? You know what? No, I don't think it does. I think that's a decision I should be able to make as one of the curators and say, no one's going to search for, I'm looking for an adventure that features a +1 battle axe, right? That's the kind of item that a DM should just be free to give out. It's not an important point in the adventure, but stuff like, oh, there's a bastard sword +1, +3 versus giants. Maybe that's the kind of thing that you as a DM would like to know or like to be able to look up. The fact that the Book of Vile Darkness is in the Temple of Elemental Evil is, to me, significant. Are Boots of Levitation significant? I'm not sure. Maybe, maybe not. Why not put them in here? And maybe that's the answer to the arrows +1, arrows +2 is there any downside to including these kind of magic items? I'm not sure. So in a sense, I imagine this may be kind of working like the Wikipedia, where there are, noted editors that are curating the content, and maybe we don't always agree, but maybe, there's a council of elders, maybe it's me, maybe people just send me stuff and I add it to this database, but then that would be me being the bottleneck. If I'm busy at work, if I'm busy in my personal life, people would be sending me stuff and they wouldn't be seeing the tool update. So this is pretty powerful. You can do stuff in FileMaker Pro, like, because this is an actual number field, it's not just a text field. If I want to look for adventures that came out after 1990, I can do that, and it'll show me you've got 2 adventures that came out after 1990. It's Night Below and The Red Hand of Doom. That seems useful to me. But rather than search for date, I think people are going to want to search for, second edition adventures. Let's see, are there any second? Yes, there's Night Below is in here. So one thing I think the tool should be able to do is I'm looking for adventures set in the Underdark that are low level. And I define low level as being less than 3rd level. Here we go. Night Below shows up. Now, notice that I was able, using FileMaker Pro's logic, to define my own idea of what low level meant. I was looking for something that was less than 3rd level, and this showed up. So having used FileMaker Pro a lot, this is my kind of go-to database solution. I think something like this would work, but maybe there's a better solution. Maybe there's a more web-friendly solution. Maybe there's something that kind of already does this that we could just go download and use. All right, so that's how I imagine the tool working. And as you can see, I've already done quite a lot of work already. I mean, just getting all of the monsters and items for Temple of Elemental Evil was no small feat. Happily, someone else had already done it, and I just went and looked it up online, right? That made it really easy. But I went and added the monsters from Red Hand of Doom, because somebody else had gone in and done that. So a lot of the work has already been done, but it gives you some idea of how I expect this to work. So now the next question is, how are we going to do this? I mean, maybe FileMaker Pro can do this. I believe that there is kind of an enterprise version of it where you run a server and people online can use the web to look things up. I think that's possible, but I'm not sure. I've never done it. I wouldn't know how to go about doing it. Ultimately, I think the best solution is one where somebody, maybe you watching this, can say, yeah, I know exactly what you want. There is a piece of software that does it. Here's a link to it. All you got to do is buy it, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you can help us set it up. I think the worst case solution, but one we'll use if we have to, is something written from scratch, because if it has to be written from scratch, that's a lot more work. And now we may be depending on people who are volunteering their time. I mean, there's no money behind this. It's probably going to cost me some money to host this, but I don't mind. Right now, the site's being hosted by my friend Jerry, but I wouldn't be surprised, and he's doing that out of the kindness of his own heart, but I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that this tool is working and doing well, that it gets the kind of traffic that requires us to spend money on the server. So that's something I'm willing to cover. I'm willing to pay for it. If there's software to buy, I'm willing to buy it. So the best solution, I think, is a software package that already exists that we can download and install. I think the next best solution is one in which we have to rely on people in the community to kind of write or code something from scratch. But really what I want to know is, what is your opinion? Do you think this is a good idea? And do you have any idea how to implement it? Because this is something where I am relying on you. A scenario that relies on volunteers in order to implement it is possible, but I think that's where things start to get thorny, because now we're relying on people doing stuff in their spare time, as opposed to a piece of software that we go buy and install where there's a company that made it. And if we have a problem or if we have a question, we can go to that company and it's their responsibility to answer it because we gave them money, as opposed to volunteers working online who might be really passionate and might get a lot of work done. But this is something where 2 or 3 years from now, we may need to modify it or add to it. So best case scenario, we buy a piece of software. Next best case scenario, we build it ourselves based on knowledgeable people in the community. There may be some of you watching this online who are thinking right now, this guy's crazy, you're insane. The thing you want to do is madness because of the nature of allowing users to add records and fields to an online database. In which case, okay, it doesn't work. It was worth a try. But I really want to provide something that empowers all dungeon masters to find the content that they want very quickly and easily. And then ideally, it would be nice if there were fields that had URLs to Drive Through RPG or the DMs Guild that have adventures on there already. You can do some of this kind of stuff on RPG Now or the DMs Guild, which used to be dndclassics.com. You can search for like low-level adventures and stuff like that, but there's not an easy way to do what I'm talking about for all adventures using all criteria, including stuff that wasn't published by TSR Wizards of the Coast. So that's the goal. This video is not a product. This video is just the design doc for a product, because I thought, wow, there are a lot of people watching this channel now. There must be somebody out there who knows how to do what I want to do. And if we succeed, then we help everyone who's running D&D. Maybe there's software that'll do it for us already. Maybe we have to rely on volunteers in the community. I think that's cool. Maybe we need more than just a database. Like I said, maybe we also need a forum where we can start a thread for each different adventure. And if you're wondering, where are we in the process of adding Night Below, you would go to the thread, and then the thread would tell you, oh, we need to add book 3, for instance, and I have book 3. I can start going through it and adding monsters and magic items. About half the time I've spent working on this, I've thought, wow, if we can do this, this is going to be incredible. And the other half the time, I think this is never going to work. So I'm being open-minded about the possibilities, but I am also aware that stuff like this is difficult. IMDb, the way it works is I think anyone can add to it, but they have to review it and it takes time. And maybe that's how our solution works. Also, I think this should be a free tool. I think that, like I said, I'm willing to pay for the servers once that starts incurring costs, but I don't think this should be the kind of thing where you should have to pay to use it. I think anybody should be able to look something up. Maybe only a registered user can add records and modify fields, but anybody should be able to come to this site and look up an adventure and find, hopefully, the thing they're looking for. And maybe you get a list of things that meet it and you can look and see what the different ratings are. Maybe users can write reviews of these adventures. And in each review, it would say who wrote the review and whether or not they ran the adventure as opposed to just reading it. I think there's a huge difference between how an adventure seems when you read it and then how it actually plays when you run it. One of the problems with a project like this, and I've run into this many times as a game developer, is there are solutions that you watching may be able to think of, but when you pitch it to me, I go, no, see, the problem is people won't use that. Usability is a huge part of the success of something like this. So it may be that we come up with a solution that technically fulfills all of the goals, but that for one reason or another ends up being too hard for players to use or too much of an ask. There's too much friction. This happens all the time. So that's something I, as the kind of high-level designer, am going to be keeping an eye out for, is whether or not the solution that people are pitching is something, not just will it work, but but will it also be usable? Because if it's not usable, then the fact that it actually does what we want will not be helpful. It needs to not only work, it needs to do so elegantly. So that's the pitch, that's the ask. This is the design document for a database called Adventure Lookup that lives on adventurelookup.com. You can go to that website right now. That's where this video is going to end up being hosted. And hopefully over the next couple of days or weeks, I've got a day job. This is not something that I think none of us can probably spend all our time doing, but hopefully if all of us spend a little bit of time, we end up with something special and something that is empowering to all of us. That's it. Because I'm hoping that this video gets shared outside the normal community of my viewers, we're not going to have any other, what's the opposite of a preamble? A postamble? I don't know. I kind of intend this video to be a standalone rather than part of the series I normally do. So if you want to find out what video happens next, you have to stick around till Thursday. You can probably guess if you've noticed a pattern. Other than that, come down to the comments and let me know what you think. What software do you think is a good idea? What can you do to help? Please, if you think this is a good idea, share this video everywhere you think of. Send it to your friends that you think might be able to help. And hopefully in the days and weeks to come, we discover that we have built something amazing. If not, well, at least we tried. Thanks for watching and thinking about it, and I look forward to seeing your comments below.